Hi everyone. In the last video, I talked a bit about Gorbachev and the fall of the Soviet Union. And that left Russia really kind of on the edge. What is going to happen next? So in this video, I want to focus on what's some big trends that happened in Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. Now, after the fall of the federal government, then basically power transfers to the Russian Republic. So now we have independent states, Georgia, Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania. Those countries are all often independent. And the Russian Republic basically takes the role that the USSR had played. So the person who comes in to be the first president of the new Russian Republic is Yeltsin. There he is with his picture, and he'll be in power through the 90s. Now, the 90s are an exceedingly difficult time for the Russian people. First of all, there is still a major economic collapse. Just because Gorbachev is gone does not mean the economy improved. Part of the problem is going to be that through the 90s, oil prices remain pretty low. Now, for the United States, that's great. I can remember even in the 90s, I came here in 96, that when you filled your car with gas, it was about $1 a gallon, right? If you had 10 gallons, it cost $10. Anyways, that's great for the United States on the whole. It might not be great for Texas, but I'm kind of off topic now. Let's come back to oil prices remaining low in the USSR. And not too surprisingly, with hyperinflation and economic trouble, it's really going to be hard to get outside investment money. People are very leery about investing in the new Russian Republic, not too surprisingly. Now, how do you transfer from a communist economy to a capitalist economy? Well, the leadership in Russia talked to the experts. And what some Western economists advised was what you do is you do it quickly. Basically, I think of this like a Band-Aid. So if I had a big Band-Aid on my hand, I could spend the next hour just trying to take it off without hurting, or I could just rip it off. Now, ripping it off might hurt more immediately, but it's going to feel better quite soon. It's not going to take an hour to feel better. So the idea here was to just quickly privatize the economy. Because remember, in the Soviet system, everything was owned by the state. So now we're going to privatize. Now, unfortunately, this privatization, this happens in January of 1992. They kind of overnight privatize and take off all the cost controls because items in the Soviet Union were controlled, the prices were controlled by the government. So they just do that. And this huge inflation problem happens. So I'm going to pull these numbers up. I'm not going to test you on these numbers. I just want you to see the inflation. Okay, so even in 1986, when inflation is better, it's at 22%. But for those people who are living in Russia in 1992, to face 2,500% inflation is disastrous. I mean, it's absolutely disastrous because no one's income is going up like this. So, the economy just kind of collapses. I remember I was teaching Russia in this period, modern Russia here at Fox. And, like teachers are being paid with toilet paper. The military is not being paid for months. It's a disaster. Okay. And basically you can think about it this way. If you had let's take a candy bar, and the candy bar in 1991 cost 1 ruble. By 1996, it would cost 2,190 rubles. That's you can buy a candy bar this today in the US for $1. But just think about if just in about 5 years, suddenly that candy bar was $2,190. That's what the Russian people are going through. This is not what they signed up for. They did not like the Soviet Union, but they did not sign up for disaster. The capitalist system was supposed to make things better. You were supposed to have higher standards of living, not lower standards of living. In the midst of all this, industrial output is down. Of course, as you hit hyperinflation, you can't import things. Jobs are collapsing. Of course, in the old system, when it was owned by the government, there was full employment. But now we're in a capitalist system, and that means industries can go bankrupt and people can lose their jobs. So in this period, we also see significant industrial output. So notice that these build on each other. So you're down 20%, and then you're down another 20%, down 15%. And so basically, the best kind of comparison I have is in the late period of the Soviet Union, per capita income in Russia was at 43% of the US. But by 1995, it's at 10%. Now, I could just sit here and keep throwing statistics at you because there is not a good statistic. Healthcare collapses, living age expectancy goes down. Everything is just a disaster. So people are not really happy with Yeltsin, not too surprisingly. And so in 1999, Yeltsin is going to have to step down because of illness, and Putin is going to come into power. And Putin basically promised the Russian people two things. One, that the economy would improve, and two, that Russia would be treated with respect in the international community. Because during the 1990s, after the US won the Cold War, basically Russia got ignored. And so when Russia would tell the US that it didn't like something, the US totally ignored it, which we wouldn't necessarily have done in the period of the Cold War. So Russia kind of feels like it's being just kicked around and ignored. So Putin is a lucky human being, because one of the things that happened right around 2000 is that oil prices go up. They go up substantially, and they stay pretty strong through about 2010, 2011. And so that means that suddenly money is pouring in, and that money can be spent on things like paying the military and fixing hospitals and getting infrastructure in place, those types of things. So as you can see here on the slide, in his early years, up to about 2009, you see economic growth, yes, growth, between 7.3% and 9% each year. Now, they're coming from a pretty low position, but still, that is excellent GDP growth. So that is wonderful. For most people, they are starting to see a little bit of improvement in their standards of living. Paychecks are being delivered, the hyperinflation stops, things are going well. So he promised you that the economy would be better, and lo and behold, the economy is better. Now, the other thing that happened, remember, is he promised to restore Russian pride and honor. And so one of the things that he does is that Russia takes a very active foreign policy role opposing the US. And you can watch this internationally. Oftentimes, Russia and the US are going to be on the opposite sides. So, for instance, early in his career, the US goes into Iraq in 2003. And Russia very much opposes this. They oppose this at the UN. They still have their seat. They inherit the USSR seat on the Security Council. And they're going to kind of lead the coalition against the Iraq War, because there are a number of nations that do not support that. You also can see Russia take a very active or aggressive foreign policy. Now, in 2014, the Russian economy was actually in a little bit of trouble. And on top of that, you were seeing some opposition to Putin. So it's very interesting at just that time that Russia decides to invade the Crimea and to take that territory from the Ukraine, and to encourage Russians who live in Ukraine to revolt. And this is very popular at home, and suddenly his approval ratings are coming back up. So he knows when to trigger things in order to help his popularity. Now, this 2004 taking of the territory from the Ukraine is why the U.S. is sanctioning Russia right now. So Russia and the U.S. are definitely on opposite sides here. We don't need to get into the Ukraine very much in this video, just kind of know that these foreign policy issues happen. Also within Russia, especially after 2009, but even earlier, there's been increasing shutdown of opposition newspapers, so freedom of the press, to assemble, all that kind of stuff has definitely disappeared in Russia. We're really pushing power, and you may have heard some recent things in the news about those issues. And also, they have revised the constitution. Now, Russia's revised its constitution numerous times under Putin to allow him to be president because he's reached his term limits. But in 2020, they reissued a new constitution. They amended, that's the word I want, amended their constitution. So now Putin can be president until 2036. So that would mean he'd be president from 1999 to 2036, which is an extremely long time. This is not really a functioning democracy anymore, although they do have elections and there are other parties. But on the whole, the politicians from the other parties are not really allowed to freely run. Now, Putin's popularity ratings tend to be very high. We're not sure how real they are, but a lot of people do like Putin because if you look back at the horrible chaos of the 90s, Russia is in a much better position. Most people's lives are much better economically, and there's peace. And on top of that, Russia plays a very important role internationally. It is a very strong nation. And so for all the kind of other issues, Putin has kept his campaign promises. And on the whole, as long as he can continue to maneuver and continue to be popular by doing different actions that they like, and as long as the economy stays pretty stable, he will probably continue to be popular. So we'll have to see where this one heads and what happens to Russia in the future.